I fell in love with my mom's best friend. The first time I saw Mavis Cutler was when I was in secondary school. I'd been in a fight and didn't want my mom to see, so I rushed back to my room. But what I saw there made my heart race and my cheeks flush. Mavis was changing clothes with her back to me. Her smooth back paired with tight jeans created alluring curves, but that was nothing compared to the sight of her long hair cascading down as she happened to be taking off her top. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. She turned and saw me. I thought she would scream in fright, but she didn't. She just smirked and said, "Your mum's going to give you a thrashing later." I quickly looked away, not daring to speak. But I couldn't leave either, afraid my mum would see I'd been beaten up. I turned my back, quietly waiting for her to change. Suddenly, she finished dressing and came close, examining my face carefully. To me, she defined the pinnacle of feminine allure. Jeans hugging her round, pert bottom, boots on her feet, a crop top under a leather jacket, large earrings paired with slightly curled hair. Mavis stood there, gazing at me. She smelled wonderful. Her lips painted a dangerous scarlet. Back then, older women often wore pencil skirts, but I'd never seen such an alternative style. She looked like a 90s Hong Kong star standing before me. She winked playfully, asking if I'd been beaten. I said I'd fallen, but she didn't believe me and asked, "Did you fight back?" Seeing she'd seen through me, I honestly replied, "No, I didn't dare," afraid of retaliation. Mavis rolled her eyes, then suddenly pulled me to sit on the bed, cupped my face and said seriously, "I'll help you hit back. Come on, don't move." She filled a basin with cold water and used a cool cloth to tend my wounds. I didn't know where to look. Meeting her gaze, her eyes were beautiful. Looking down, her red lips were still gently blowing on my bruises. Looking further down, she was bent over, helping me ice the injury. I could only awkwardly stare at the corner of the bed, each breath filled with her fragrant scent. This was the fatal allure of a mature woman that Mavis brought me at our first meeting. From then on, she lived in our house, feeling like a celebrity had moved in. At mealtimes, she'd lounge lazily in her chair, legs crossed, lighting a cigarette, listening with amusement as my mum scolded me for being clumsy and falling off my bike. She didn't tell my mum I'd been beaten up. In my memory, everyone said women shouldn't smoke. But Mavis looked beautiful when she smoked. I asked Mavis why she was living with us, but they told me not to be nosy. Our house was small, with no spare room, so to avoid Mavis sleeping with my parents, Mum put up a curtain in my room. Mavis slept in my bed, while I made do on the floor. Late at night, as I lay on my makeshift bed, Mavis sat on the bed wearing a strappy nightgown, applying body lotion. I watched those hands glide over her snow-white legs, feeling suddenly shy, but she treated me like a child and didn't mind, casually asking, "Why did they beat you up?" I said, "He was smoking in the loo when the teacher came. He wanted to hide the fags with me, but I was scared. The teacher found them on him, so he told me not to leave after school." Mavis nodded, then suddenly grabbed the curtain and pulled it shut. I heard the sound of clothes being removed on the other side, and Mavis said, "I'll help you hit back." She promised to protect me, but a teenage boy's mind can be quite dirty. All I could think about was that she had taken off her clothes. On the other side of this curtain, she was naked. I did something naughty. The room had lights on both sides, and I turned off the one on my side. Light shone through the curtain, and I saw Mavis's graceful silhouette. She was applying lotion to her body. Though just a shadow, it was as beautiful as a painting. She also advised me that next time someone tells me not to leave after school, I should climb over the wall and run away. That night in bed, I punched myself hard under the covers. I cursed myself for being so disgusting. Mavis was so kind, yet I peeped at her shadow. I fell asleep feeling deeply ashamed, while Mavis had forgotten the promise she made to me. A month later, late one night, she called me out, saying we were going to get revenge. I was stunned. It had been a month, and everyone except me had forgotten about the incident. Mavis Cutler told me very seriously, "When you want to get revenge on someone, Never let them know it was you. I had thought Mavis would find a group of thugs and have me beat him up in front of everyone, letting me save face. But her revenge was different. We went to my classmate's house. She had a friend from out of town call my classmate, saying there was a takeaway delivery and asking him to come down to get it. Then, Mavis pulled me to hide in the stairwell. She whispered to me, "Don't say a word, or we'll be recognized." I was extremely nervous. When my classmate came downstairs, Mavis followed behind him and suddenly pulled out a thick black plastic bag from her pocket, putting it over his head. I was shocked, but Mavis had already started. She took off her leather boot and struck my classmate hard on the head with it. My classmate fell to the ground, desperately trying to remove the plastic bag. Seeing this, I quickly rushed over and held the bag down, pressing it against the back of his head. He was panicking, and the more he panicked, the more erratic his breathing became. The more erratic his breathing, the tighter the plastic bag clung to his mouth and nose, making it impossible for him to breathe. He couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Mavis was hitting the left side of his face with her boot, while I clenched my fist and punched the right side of his face hard. My classmate, usually a bully who loved to torment others at school, was actually crying from our beating. The head inside the plastic bag was making sobbing noises, and you could hear how desperate and helpless he was. Because of the plastic bag, his crying was intermittent. We beat him until he was barely conscious. I was feeling both excited and addicted to it, but Mavis suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled me to run away. But I was so caught up in the beating that I couldn't stop myself in time, and I accidentally pulled Mavis down. She fell to the ground, inhaling sharply from the pain. I felt terribly guilty and quickly wanted to ask if she was all right, but she gestured for me not to speak. She lowered her voice and told me that if we continued, it would go too far and we should stop now. I hurriedly escaped with her. Mavis seemed to be injured, limping as she ran, so I quickly supported her as we fled. We hid behind a building, and I saw my classmate finally manage to remove the plastic bag, lying on the ground and crying as if he were being slaughtered. Mavis took out her phone and recorded everything. Then she said, "Later, create a fake account and post this video in your class WhatsApp group. Let all your classmates see him crying from the beating and ruin his reputation." I nodded excitedly and couldn't help but ask, "Can I tell my best friend that I did it?" Her smile suddenly disappeared, and she became very serious. She said earnestly, "Remember, a secret spoken is no longer a secret." Looking into her eyes, I suddenly realized she was different from all the other adults. Other adults would only teach me to tell the teacher or parents. But she taught me that when you're bullied, you should get revenge. And even if you use the most despicable and dark methods, you shouldn't let anyone know what you've done. People always taught me to be a gentleman, but Mavis taught me to be cunning. On the way back, because Mavis had injured her leg, she asked me to carry her on my back. I crouched down, feeling her warm, soft body against my back. In that moment, my heart skipped a beat, and I nervously held onto her thighs. She was wearing tight jeans, and I could clearly feel her body heat through my fingertips. Mavis whispered in my ear, "Did you enjoy it?" Her breath was like orchids, making my ear tingle. I nodded, blushing, and carried her home. When I got home, I followed Mavis's advice and created a new WhatsApp account to join the class group. I posted the video of my classmate being beaten up in the group. The whole class soon knew he had been beaten and cried. He was furious, swearing in the group and demanding to know who I was. I coldly replied, "Be careful when you go out at night from now on." After replying, I left the group. I remembered Mavis's instructions, but this feeling was unbearable. When he hit me, the whole class saw it. Now that I had hit him back, no one knew it was me. I desperately wanted people to know about this. Thinking my best friend wouldn't betray me, I secretly told him that I was the one who did it. My best friend excitedly asked me what happened, so I told him everything about me and Mavis. After explaining, I reminded him that he was my best friend and shouldn't betray me. He promised to keep it a secret. Just as I finished replying, Mavis came out of the bathroom limping. I quickly closed my phone, not daring to let her see that I had disobeyed. She said she had twisted her ankle, so I hurried to get the medicinal alcohol we had at home. I asked Mavis to sit on the bed, and then I carefully started applying the medicine to her ankle. Suddenly, Mavis let out a cry of pain. I nervously looked up at her, and that's when things went wrong. She was only wearing a short nightgown with thin straps, and the dress was quite short. I was kneeling in front of her, applying the medicine. I froze, captivated. Mavis noticed my inappropriate gaze and immediately covered herself with her dress. She then reached out and lightly smacked my head, saying, "Behave yourself." I quickly apologized, blushing as I carefully continued applying the medicine. Perhaps to ease the awkwardness, Mavis suddenly said with a smile, "Oh my, you can blush? How cute." She was just trying to lighten the mood, but I misunderstood her intention. I thought she was giving me permission. Overwhelmed by a strong impulse, I couldn't control myself and looked up at her with burning desire. Before Mavis could react, I had already kissed her red lips. I had only intended to give her a light kiss, but the moment I actually kissed her, feeling her soft lips and sweet fragrance, something exploded in my head. I couldn't help but wrap my arms around her waist. At that moment, I fully understood the fatal allure of a mature woman. The silkiness of her nightgown, the curves of her waist, every breath filled with her intoxicating scent. She tried to speak in panic, but only managed to say no before I silenced her with my lips. She attempted to push my chest away, but I pressed her down onto the bed. I looked down at Mavis, wanting to kiss her again, but I was stunned. She lay on the bed, her nightgown disheveled. Her usually playful face now showed a hint of fear, especially those beautiful eyes, which had already begun to tear up. I realized that Mavis, who always seemed so mature, also had a frightened and vulnerable side. And this side was revealed because of me. Mavis spoke with a trembling voice, softly pleading, "Please, don't." My heart ached. I couldn't help but slap myself hard across the face. I apologized to her and quickly ran out of the room. I hid in the hallway outside the room. I imagined many times that Mavis would come out and ask me to return, but she didn't. I spent the entire night in the hallway. When I closed my eyes, all I could see was her tear-stained face. I'm such a beast. I was moved by her beauty. She was so kind to me, and all I could think about was that. It wasn't until morning that Mavis came out of the room. She told me to go back to my room and change clothes so my mom wouldn't notice anything. What concerned me more was that her eyes were swollen from crying. I must have lost my mind because I actually asked her, "If it made you cry all night, do you really despise me that much?" She glanced at me, then suddenly crouched in front of me, cupping my face in her hands and said, "Try kissing me." I looked at her in surprise, thinking she had changed her mind. Unable to control my excitement, I kissed her, but immediately after, she bit my lip hard. In an instant, blood gushed out, spraying onto my own face. She bit down with such force that I almost screamed in pain. A large amount of blood dripped onto the floor. I tried hard not to cry out, while Mavis kept biting me fiercely. I looked into Mavis's eyes. Those beautiful eyes were now filled with coldness. She didn't stop but bit down even harder. The pain made me cry, and I mumbled "I'm sorry" through my tears, even though my words were barely intelligible. Only then did Mavis release her bite. I spat out a mouthful of blood. I tried to touch my lips with my hand and was horrified to find that she had bitten so deep, it felt like she had almost bitten through my lip. As I continued spitting blood, she smiled again and said, "We're even now. If you ever try to kiss me again, I'll tear off the whole piece of flesh. When your mom asks, just say you fell off your bicycle." Understood. I nodded repeatedly in terror. Because of this kiss, I had to get 5 stitches at the hospital. From that day on, my lips were ruined, left with a deformed scar. The doctor told me that recovery was impossible, and I should be grateful that my lips were still attached, albeit by a thin strip of flesh. My mom called me an idiot and confiscated my bicycle. I felt guilty towards Mavis and couldn't help but ask my mom how long she would be staying with us. Her expression darkened. Finally, My mum revealed the reason for Mavis's stay at our house. She explained that Mavis used to run a successful business in the outskirts, but during a business dinner, a client got her drunk and tried to take advantage of her. In self-defense, she stabbed him. After the incident, Mavis fled to our area, leaving both parties in a stalemate. The client couldn't go to the police without admitting attempted rape. Mavis couldn't report it either, as she had stabbed someone. But the client was influential, so now she was negotiating with both legal and underground contacts in the outskirts. Once the matter was resolved, she could return. As I listened to my mum, my body trembled uncontrollably. I had never imagined she was capable of stabbing someone. Mavis truly cared for my mum. Otherwise, I reckon she might have stabbed me last night. Those tears she shed weren't for me, but for my mum. She really is a good person. The troubling thing is, I found myself falling for her even more. They say the most dangerous women are the most alluring, and it's not just a saying. That evening when I returned home, we had made up, just as Mavis had said. She's a free spirit. Once she's had her revenge, she genuinely lets bygones be bygones. As if we were meeting for the first time, she gently applied medicine to my wound, asking if it still hurt, completely disregarding the fact that she had caused it. Looking into her eyes, I said earnestly, "Mavis, I really like you." Mavis continued applying the medicine, casually replying, "I'm 15 years older than you." I said I didn't care, I just wanted to know what kind of man she liked. She told me matter-of-factly that she liked men who were stronger than her. Hearing this, I was devastated. I'm just a coward who doesn't dare fight back when beaten. She's not only a wealthy businesswoman but also dares to stab people. How could I possibly be stronger than her in any aspect? After finishing with the medicine, Mavis pinched my cheek and said, "You little rascal, it's my turn now." She sat on the bed and lifted her foot. Unlike last night, she wasn't wearing a skirt this time, but shorts. I knelt on one knee in front of her, cradling her foot as I applied the medicine, softly saying, "Mavis, I still like you." She quietly replied, "Shut up." I knew Mavis was getting a bit impatient, but I also knew that at the most arrogant age of my life, I had met the woman who could humble me the most. I would willingly give everything for her. Yet all I could offer Mavis was trouble. That night when I got home, my mum told me that Mavis would be leaving tomorrow. It turned out she had found an influential mediator and was returning to the outskirts tomorrow to negotiate with the client. Learning of Mavis's departure, I was incredibly upset and sulked throughout dinner. Mavis noticed my sadness, and after dinner, she patted my shoulder, asking if I wanted to go for a walk. I reluctantly went out with her. Walking beside me, she lit a cigarette. The flame illuminated half of her beautiful face as she slowly exhaled smoke and said softly, "You're quite adorable, actually. I don't dislike you." I touched my scarred lip and asked, "Then why did you do this to me?" She said, "Because your approach was wrong. Remember, as a man, you should be upright and honest. Never forcefully kiss a girl without her consent. She might be someone else's wife in the future. You have no right to force a kiss on her." I remained silent, her words stinging me. Would she be someone else's wife in the future? If that day ever came, I would surely be heartbroken. I walked with my head down when suddenly Mavis Cutler pushed me hard. I told her not to push me, but she shoved me again forcefully. I turned my head, wanting to say I was feeling down, but I was stunned. It wasn't Mavis who pushed me. My classmate stood behind us, his eyes blazing with anger. He had brought several people with him. He gritted his teeth and pushed my face, making me stumble back several steps, nearly falling. He roared, "Bloody hell. It was just you two who beat me up that day, wasn't it?" Mavis was stunned, looking at me in disbelief. I hadn't expected my best friend would betray me. I hurriedly denied it, saying I didn't do it, but my classmate immediately started to recount the events. I then realized that after I told my best friend, he told his girlfriend, asking her to keep it a secret. But his girlfriend then told her best friend, making her promise to keep it confidential. Her best friend immediately told my classmate because they were cousins. Each of us had only told the person closest to us. But as Mavis had said, once a secret is spoken, it's no longer a secret. Mavis looked at me in shock, her eyes tinged with disappointment. But my body couldn't stop shaking. Because what I told my best friend wasn't just about this incident. By now, my classmate had led those thugs to stand in front of Mavis. Mavis took her cigarette out and held it in her hand. Suddenly, my classmate grabbed the zipper of her leather jacket and yanked it down hard. The zipper was pulled open, revealing Mavis's figure to everyone. They all whistled teasingly. My classmate excitedly licked his lips, put his arm around Mavis's waist, and said with a wicked grin, "Don't worry, I don't hit women. But you hit me, so how do you plan to make it up to me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Mavis had already grabbed his hair, tilting his face up. Then she raised her hand and jabbed the burning cigarette towards my classmate's face. Mavis's revenge was always swift and brutal. Just then, my classmate cried out, "You stabbed someone in the outskirts, didn't you?" In that instant, Mavis stopped. My heart started pounding violently. I had told my best friend everything, and he had blabbed it all. Mavis stood there, frozen and at a loss, while my classmate, still holding her waist, suddenly pulled off her entire leather jacket and whispered in her ear, "If I go to the police, you'll be in prison immediately. I heard you've got a big business going on out there. Can you afford to go to prison?" The other young thugs chimed in. "Yeah, we don't care anyway. We're all people with no future. But you're different, aren't you? You've finally become a boss lady. If you go to prison, you'll lose everything." Finally, I saw Mavis tremble. She wasn't afraid of these thugs. She was afraid of the law. In the face of the absolute power of the law, she was like an ant, unable to control her terror. Seeing that they had Mavis cornered, the young thugs all excitedly stepped forward. I watched helplessly as the buttons of Mavis's blouse were undone one by one, everyone staring at her greedily. My classmate, impatient, threatened, "Either come with us to the woods, or I'll go to the police. Your choice." Everyone was excited. Mavis was stunningly beautiful, and no one could contain their bestial urges at this moment, as if blessed by Lady Luck herself. I had once seen Mavis's silhouette through the curtain. I had fantasized that one day, her exquisite figure would be revealed before my eyes, that she would kiss my forehead and tell me she liked me. Today, my dream came true in the most tragic way possible. In the moonlight, wearing only a thin bra and her unbuttoned blouse, she turned to look at me. There was no hatred in that gaze, no disappointment. Mavis, once so full of spirit, now had only fear in her eyes. Once again, she became so fragile. She wiped away her tears, wanting to cry but stubbornly holding back her trembling lips as she turned to follow them into the woods. Afraid I might call for help, 3 of them went in first, leaving 2 to guard me. I stared hard at Mavis's retreating figure, feeling an indescribable pain in my heart. I had let her down. Mavis had taught me many lessons. She was always right, but I didn't listen to her. This foolishness led me to bring disaster upon her. I anxiously moved towards Mavis, but was stopped by those 2 men. One of them pushed my chest forcefully, telling me impatiently, "What do you think you're doing? How strange." If this had happened at any other time, I would have been trembling with fear, my legs turning to jelly. But at this moment, there was no fear in my heart. Mavis once said she liked men stronger than herself. And I finally understood that I wasn't a coward, because at this moment I possessed courage I had never known before. More than my own life, I was worried about her. Turns out that not fighting back when hit doesn't make you a coward. Not speaking up when bullied doesn't make you a coward. Lowering your head and admitting fault when a woman bites your lip doesn't make you a coward either. Everyone has a bottom line in their heart, a reverse scale. At this moment, I finally understood that Mavis was my reverse scale. They still thought I was the usual coward. The one who hadn't stopped me lit a cigarette with disdain, lowering his head to light it. I stared intently at the thug blocking my way, clenched my fist, and suddenly threw a punch at him. I wasn't aiming for his head or his stomach. I grabbed his hair with one hand and, with all my might, slammed my fist into his throat. He tried to shout, but when my fist connected with his neck, he couldn't make a sound. His throat visibly caved in from my punch. He clutched his neck in agony, falling to his knees. His face turned bright red as he coughed up blood, struggling to breathe, but his twisted windpipe made it impossible. The one lighting the cigarette noticed something was wrong. As he looked up to check, I grabbed both his ears and leapt with all my strength. I never knew I could jump so high. I brought my knee up hard, smashing it into his chin. He let out a muffled groan, his body falling backwards, but I didn't let him drop. I held onto his head, repeatedly bringing my knee up to strike his face. My whole body was trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was from heartache. Just thinking about Mavis crying in the moonlight made my chest tighten, making me want to lash out violently. I'd taken down these two, and at the same time, I heard Mavis crying from the small copse. My head was burning. I picked up a rock from the ground and ran towards the copse. I knew I was wrong, but I didn't regret it. Everyone makes mistakes, but the tragedy is that not many are willing to make amends for their errors. Today, in front of her, I made a mistake. I'm not afraid, and I don't regret it, because I want to show her through my actions that even if it costs me my life, I'll make up for everything I've done wrong to her. Mavis, it's only now that I understand. I love her, even if it costs me my life. I burst into the copse, shouting loudly. Mavis had fallen to the ground, clutching her clothes in terror. My classmate was standing beside her. Hearing my shout, he looked at me impatiently. What the bloody hell? He didn't finish his sentence, because I had caught up to him and smashed the rock into his face. I heard the sound of bones breaking. His nose was shattered, blood gushing out, but I didn't stop. I grabbed his throat and roared at him. It's you, you bloody bastard. If you can't learn to speak properly, I'll smash that filthy mouth of yours. I gripped the rock and slammed it into his mouth. In the quiet copse, his piercing screams echoed. I had knocked out his front teeth, and he spat out several broken ones. But I still didn't stop. In my mind, all I could see was Mavis's heartbreaking expression. I held the rock and struck again and again. The others who had wanted to help initially now froze in terror when they saw the state of my classmate. I had been holding the rock with one hand, but I switched to both. Straddling him, I raised the rock with both hands, aiming at his mouth, using all my strength again and again. Oi! Stop it! You'll kill him if you don't stop. The others were too scared to intervene, only able to shout warnings from the sidelines. My hands were covered in blood. His blood splattered on my body, my face, in my eyes. The world seemed to be tinged with a bloody red. In this sea of blood, I searched for Mavis. Only when I wiped my eyes did I see her sitting there, stunned, covering her mouth with her hand. I lowered my head and said to my classmate, I know where you live. I know where your parents work. I know which school your cousin attends. Now I'm going to the police station to turn myself in. I'm still 2 months shy of 18. When I get out, if she's in prison, I'll kill your entire family. My classmate spat out a mouthful of blood and broken teeth. This person who used to bully me now looked at me and began to cry in fear. He couldn't form coherent words. I said coldly, and remember this, when you bully others and they don't fight back, it's not because they're really afraid of you. It's because they care about their future, want to go to university. You're worthless, not worth ruining their prospects over. That's why you've been able to strut around for so long. But her, in this world, to me, she's always worth it. I dropped the rock and took out my phone to call the police. When the call connected, I said softly, Hello? I want to turn myself in. Which police station should I go to? After finishing the call, I put away my phone and approached Mavis. I knelt before her on one knee, gently buttoning up her blouse. I like you, Mavis. I admit that at first it was driven by hormones. You seemed like the most beautiful woman in the world, bursting into my life. You've taught me so much. Your soul is fascinating, and you've shown me a different way of living. I'm sorry for judging you based on appearances, thinking you were a loose woman, which led me to kiss you so boldly. I want to sincerely apologize for that. They say the most dangerous things are the most alluring, but I think that's nonsense because you're not dangerous at all. Every positive word in existence could be used to describe you. As I buttoned up Mavis's blouse one by one, she began to cry, her voice trembling. I was so scared earlier. I wanted to find a way out, but I couldn't think of anything. The usually composed Mavis now buried herself in my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I held her, gently stroking her head, and whispered, "I know you're not always as strong as you seem, just like when I first kissed her," and she fell onto the bed crying. Or now, in this small grove, as she wept in fear. Mavis was never a casual woman. Whenever it came to matters like this, she would become vulnerable and helpless. I cupped Mavis's face in my hands, regrettably staining her beautiful features with the blood on my hands. I said softly, "There's something I misunderstood about you." "I'm sorry." She asked me what it was. I replied, "When I heard you had stabbed someone, I thought you were a tough character. But on that day, you must have cried helplessly, didn't you?" I could almost see Mavis that day, clutching the bloody knife, cowering in a corner, unable to hold back her tears. I lowered my head, pressing my forehead against hers, inhaling her sweet scent. Her red lips were mere inches from mine. But this time I didn't kiss her. I turned myself in at the police station. The outcome was predictable. The school expelled me, and my parents did everything they could to pay compensation. Of course, Mavis also contributed a significant amount of money. My mom came to see me. She cried, saying I was too foolish and that I had ruined my future. I knew I had been foolish, but it wasn't that night's actions that were foolish. It was my earlier self who didn't listen to Mavis and told others about our secret. Mavis returned to the outskirts to do business, but I heard that the deal with that client didn't go well. He imposed many conditions on Mavis, making her life quite difficult, but she still faced it all with strength. For years later, I sat in a pub booth, facing a client who had his arms around two women. He looked at my business card with disdain before tossing it aside. He said impatiently, "I'm not selling this equipment because my old factory is failing, but because I want to explore new ventures. It's only because of my friendship with your boss that I'm offering her these machines." I replied, "This equipment is severely outdated and can't keep up with current component demands. We're not interested in acquiring it." He laughed haughtily and said, "Who do you think you are? An ex-con daring to negotiate business on behalf of your boss? Tell her to come here herself." I shook my head and said quietly, "I'm afraid if she came, you'd get handsy with her like you did back then." The client sneered, "So what if I touch her? Even if I made her strip naked and kneel before me, demanding her to—" Before he could finish, I had already grabbed a beer bottle from the table and shoved it into his mouth. Beer kept pouring down his throat as he struggled to spit it out, but I held him down. The two women screamed in terror and quickly fled the booth. I picked up a fruit knife from the table and held it against his eye. He shuddered in fear as I said seriously, "If I slash both your eyes with this knife, I'd probably get 7 years. I already have a criminal record and not much of a future. Do you think it's worth trading my 7 years for you spending the rest of your life blind? Oh, and by the way, I have a lifetime contract. Even if I go to prison, I'll still get paid." The once arrogant client now whimpered, but with the beer bottle still in his mouth, he couldn't utter a coherent word. As the knife slowly cut into his eyelid, I said softly, "You could try to retaliate, but I've got a few young thugs who don't care about their futures. Your kid goes to St. Mary's Primary School, and your wife likes to visit Liz's beauty salon. If you want to play dirty, I can play even dirtier. I can pay £20,000 a year to send some lowlife to prison for throwing boiling water on your son's face. Do you think he'd do it?" An entire bottle of beer was forced down the client's throat. I opened a new bottle, poured myself a glass, and said quietly, "I'll make this decision for my boss. We're not taking the deal. Let's hope that while business doesn't work out, our friendship can endure." I raised my glass to him and drank it in one go. I straightened my suit and walked out of the pub. The car was already waiting at the door. The two young thugs who had attacked me years ago bowed to me as they saw me. One of them, with a hoarse voice, said, "Boss, back to the company?" His throat had been injured by me back then, but at least he could still speak. Mavis had handled these people well, making them sign apology letters. I nodded and got into the car, casually saying, "Let's stop by the florist first." I arrived at Mavis's office with a bouquet of roses. She was looking at the account books and sighed as she took my flowers. "A bouquet every day? Aren't you tired of it?" I said, "There are too many flies around you. If there are fresh roses in the office every day, at least people will know that someone is by your side." She rolled her eyes, and I reached out to gently massage her shoulders. She rubbed her temples, and I said softly, "Is work troubling you?" She said, "My nephew's accounts don't add up. The steel I asked him to procure shouldn't cost this much, but he's my own nephew, and I'm counting on him to take care of me in my old age." I said, "I'll handle it, both the steel issue and the retirement care." She said, "Don't be silly, he's my own nephew." I lowered my head and kissed her face, whispering, "I'll give him a more civilized solution." She closed her eyes. The company was empty now. I held her waist and kissed the face I loved most with all my tenderness. When I greedily tried to kiss the corner of her mouth again, she slowly pushed me away and playfully asked, "Want to get bitten again? Silly boy." I said, "Try me." She shook her head, closed the account book and said, "Don't be foolish. I won't marry you, whether it's for your mother's sake, my reputation, or the property I leave for my family." I smiled. "It's fine if we don't get married. As long as I'm not married, I can do more for you. Haven't you thought about finding another girl? You're driving a Mercedes now, earning a hefty salary, and I'm training you to be the deputy CEO. You could easily start a new family." "No good. If I had a family, I couldn't devote myself to you like this anymore." She sighed. "You're making this very difficult for me. We won't receive blessings for this. This relationship won't be happy." I said, "As long as you don't bite me, I'm very happy." I lowered my head and kissed her red lips. She didn't bite me. She hesitated for a long time. Finally, her tongue came out. I held her waist and kissed her passionately. Mavis didn't lie. She was a person who cared about her reputation. She never married me, nor did she make our relationship public. She said, "I don't regret falling for you, but if we break that barrier, how are we supposed to live among these ordinary people?" I knew she was telling me, "You can leave me anytime. Go find your own happiness." Unfortunately, Mavis miscalculated. I never formed a new family, because only by completely disregarding my own future could I protect her well. As time went by, everyone mocked me, saying I was like a mad dog by Mavis's side, that a dog could never be worthy of its master. I didn't care about these words. I still dressed in a suit every day, bought a bouquet of roses, and sent them to her office. It doesn't matter if I can't have her in this life. I had long promised that she would always be worth it. These roses, from her office to her hospital room, from her hospital room to her grave. Mavis never accepted me in her lifetime. From the moment I met true love as a young man until middle age, bought a house by the cemetery to guard the one in my heart. Mavis didn't leave anything for me. Before she left, she asked if I had any regrets. I just smiled and kissed her forehead. Over the decades, people no longer called me a mad dog, but treated me as her loyal servant. From a coward to a loyal servant. Serving her for a lifetime, I have no regrets.